Today's show is brought to you by Audible, and right now you can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/joinedup. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle or MP3 player. Thanks for tuning in to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, a weekly show featuring interviews with fantastic authors sharing their personal stories on how and why they write. There's hints and tips for aspiring writers and great book reviews from top bloggers. Follow us on Twitter at JU Podcast. Right, cue the cheesy theme tune.
Put down your pen and stop your typing. Grab yourself a drink, cause it's Joined Up Writing.
Hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, where a little procrastination can go a long way. I'm Wayne Kelly and it's episode 67, bringing you a fascinating chat today with literary writer Claire Fuller. Claire's got loads to say about her journey to publication, her book and how she goes about writing and editing her novels. We'll also have a review of one of my favourite books of the year, The Birdwatcher, by previous guest William Shaw, with Victoria Goldman telling us what she thought of that book. I listened to The Birdwatcher actually on Audible, and I recommend you give it a go for free if you want, with our free 30-day trial that we can offer to our listeners by going to audibletrial.com/joinedup. You can also find today's guest, Claire Fuller's latest book, Swimming Lessons, on there as well, so why not give it a go? Before we get to the chat, just a quick update from me as we hurtle towards the end of the year. I haven't been nearly as productive as I would have liked over the past week or two, and I don't think I'm on my own there, and I guess it's the time of the year. But I've really got to get back to it with what's left of this month. I wrote a post actually over at WayneKellyWrites.com with some of my suggestions as to how you can stay productive over the festive period. So you might want to go and check that out, read the post, share your advice in the comments too. I'm always up for learning some more tips, hints and tips, and learning how I can keep productive and do things a little bit better. As well as my novel Safe Hands, I've been working on a new non-fiction project with fellow writing buddy Maria Smith. I can't reveal what that is just yet, but I'll be telling you more about it in the new year. Let's just say it's the first in what we hope will be a series of books that will help those of you just starting out with writing your own first novel. Other than that, I'm pushing on with my rewrite and trying to build the strongest story and structure that I can from a novel. It's a really complicated job, and I'm sure it will require extra Christmas spirit, or spirits, if I'm going to get through it over the Christmas period. Anyway, right, on to today's guest, Claire Fuller. So Claire is a writer and artist. As well as writing novels and short fiction, Claire has studied sculpture, specialising in wood and stone carving, as well as having a previous successful career in marketing. She's got a master's in creative and critical writing, and her first novel, Our Endless Numbered Days, won the 2015 Desmond Elliott Prize. Her second novel, Swimming Lessons, was published early in 2017, and her third, Bitter Orange, will be published in 2019. I really enjoyed our chat, and I'm sure you will too. All right, Claire, thanks a million for joining us on Joined Up Writing Podcast. Really appreciate it. How's things been going?
Very good. Yes. I've just finished book number 3, which will be out in a year or so. Publishing is always takes so long, so much longer than I ever anticipated before I started, and now I have grown used to becoming patient. I am more patient than I ever was.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. How do you find that? Because especially obviously with traditional publishing, and with indie publishers, obviously they pretty much can write a book and put it out whenever they like. But have you kind of managed to kind of adapt to that over time?
Yes, and I'm almost kind of in advance of myself. So the gap between when my publisher buys my book and when it is published, I use that time for writing the next book. So I do have this kind of schedule that I've set myself, which seems to work quite well.
Kind of a bit of a rhythm going.
Yeah, exactly. But the first time, when my first book was bought, Our Endless Numbered Days by Penguin, and they bought it and then it didn't come out for 19 months. Mm-hmm. That for an impatient person, that seemed like a very long time.
Yeah, definitely. Especially something so exciting as the first time you published. I should imagine it was hell.
Yeah, it was hard. It was really hard.
Well, I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that. That was one of the things I was going to mention to you a little bit later. But for a start, just why don't you tell us about your most recent novel, the one that came out, I think it was February this year, Swimming Lessons. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah. So Swimming Lessons, it's set in Dorset by the sea. So it's all about sea swimming, really. But it's a story about a woman called Ingrid, who she writes letters to her husband Gil about their marriage and their life together. And it hasn't been a particularly happy marriage. Gil isn't a very nice character. He's not a very good husband. But instead of giving them to him or sending them to him, she hides them in the books that he collects. And he collects thousands and thousands of books for their marginalia and the things that people leave behind in them, rather than for the content, for the story. And when Ingrid has written her last letter, she disappears off a Dorset beach and nobody knows what's happened to her. So there are the letters, and then interspersed with these are another story, which is 12 years later, when Ingrid has still not been found, or her body not been found, and nobody knows what's happened, when her daughter, Flora, comes home to look after her father, Flora's father, Gil, because he's had an accident and he believes he's seen Ingrid from a bookshop window. And Flora comes home finally wanting answers to what happened to her mother and asking questions of her sister and other people, without realising that actually the answers are in the books that surround her in the house.
Well, I've read it and I absolutely loved it. It was really, really interesting setting, and the cast of characters was amazing, and particularly the structure. Where was the kind of inspiration for originally? Because it seems like such an original idea, or at least the way you told it.
Yeah. Well, it was a couple of things, really. I was doing some art projects with my husband, although he wasn't my husband then. It was about 8-9 years ago, and he was living in Reading and I was living in Winchester, and we decided that we would write notes to each other and hide them in each other's houses. And I guess we hadn't long met, so they were love notes.
Yeah.
And so I hid 5 in his house and he hid 5 in mine, and then we decided that he would sell his flat and he would move in with me. And in the process, he found all 5 notes, and I'd hidden them and stuck them behind his mirror and in an old saucepan. Anyway, he found them all. And then, so now it's 8-9 years later, and there are still 2 notes in the house that we share together that I haven't found.
Wow.
I almost don't want to find them now. Because they might just say, come on, get on with the washing up, or, something not very romantic, who knows. But we have an awful lot of books. I'm a writer, he's a librarian. We have thousands of books. So I'm absolutely convinced that he has hidden them in the books, because that's the easiest place to hide them. So every now and again I go and flick through a few books, but I still haven't found them. And I'm convinced he moves the letters back to the books that I've looked through.
Oh, that's pretty dastardly if he's doing that.
Sneaky. Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah. So there was that was kind of one part of the idea, that whole idea of hiding things in a house. And then I also write a lot of flash fiction, and I had written one a little while ago about a man on a beach. And the things that he finds on the beach. So he found, I think it was a fiberglass life-size giraffe's head, and all sorts of odd things that get washed up. And that character turned into Gil, the man in the book, and he was walking along the beach where he lives and walking back to his house. So that kind of character grew from that.
Well, it's really, really interesting. I really, really enjoyed it, and the structure in particular. So for people that have, obviously you've kind of alluded to how the kind of story works, but in terms of how the structure of the book works, so we've kind of got a chapter of narrative, if you like, and then we've got, or it's set in the present day from the point of view of the characters that are around now, and then we flick back to these letters, don't we? So tell us a little bit about, when did you decide that, or was it right from the outset you thought, this is how I'm going to make this book work, I'm going to do it in this way?
No, not at all. So I had Gil. Usually I start with a character and a location without knowing anything about the structure or what's going to happen or who's going to live or who's going to die or the ending or anything. So I had Gill by the Sea. I did know I wanted to make it a book that contained a lot of nature writing, even though it's fiction. And so it's set in this village which is by the sea, which is a real village not too far from me where I go sea swimming. So I had Gill. I started writing the book from Gill's point of view, and he started developing as a character, and I kind of discovered that actually he's not really a very nice man. and I'd written maybe, I don't know, 20 or 30,000 words, and I thought, actually, I just don't want to hear from you anymore. So I deleted a lot of them, and in fact all that's left now is the prologue from Gill's point of view.
The intro, yeah.
Yeah, and then I thought, well, I by then I already knew that Ingrid disappeared off a beach, but I decided I did want to hear from Ingrid how she saw her husband compared to how their daughter saw him, because they have a very different view of this same man. And I thought, well, she's already gone. How am I going to show how she sees this marriage? So I thought, well, she could write him letters, and then Flora comes home to care for her father, so they intersperse with the letters. It just
clicked together.
It clicked, yes. Often things that happen in my book are a response to a kind of issue that I've written myself into, and it just, they come out as kind of a logical consequence of writing problems, really.
And when you were writing it, because you've kind of essentially got these, almost like these two stories kind of working almost like backwards to meet each other in the middle, almost.
Yes, yeah.
Did you, when you wrote it, did you kind of go, right, okay, well, I'm just going to sit down, I'm going to write all of Ingrid's story, in the letters, and I'll do that first, and then I'll go back and I'll fit in the bits of present-day narrative? Or did you pretty much write it as it appears now in terms of the chapters and things? You finished a chapter and you thought, right, now it's time to hear from Ingrid again, or?
Yeah, no, it was, I wrote it as it appears in the book. So every alternate chapter was a letter or the present day. And I went through and I wrote it like that from beginning to end. But then when my editor got hold of it, she said, well, I think it really needs a letter in the middle to kind of slow down the action, or to have Ingrid consider what she was doing more. But of course, putting that in threw the whole thing out of sequence, and I had to rework all sorts of things because I had imposed this structure upon it. But
that always happens, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But you sort of accidentally break it, and then you have to
fix it.
It's the ripple effect. One seemingly innocuous change, and it ripples down through everything.
It is amazing how that happens, when it can sometimes, in that case it was a whole chapter and you expect it to have a huge effect on the rest of the novel, but sometimes it can almost be a line, and you look at those consequences, and it is like a ripple effect. You see one change and you realise you changed that, all sorts of things change. But I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, because actually I really like editing. That's the bit that I really enjoy.
Well, yeah, I must admit I like editing as well, but lots of authors don't.
No, they don't. I find that odd. They like writing the original story, and I hate doing that. I really don't enjoy it.
That's the hard graft bit, isn't it? That's the thinking bit.
It is.
That's interesting. Well, it works really, really well, because it does sort of come together like this big jigsaw, and there is like a real... Well, there's kind of a suspense. I found there was a suspense going all the way through it anyway, because you kind of do want to know what happened. But the other thing that kind of worked from a suspense point of view was there's always this thing where, like, is somebody going to find one of these letters, or were they? And you just hoping, and I won't spoil it or anything like that. Well, so there's a couple of bits in the book where you think, oh no, if she'd have just found that. But that's great, it's great. But no, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was.
Thank you.
It was really, really good. So yeah, so do you find that your first draft comes fairly quickly, and then the hard work of the editing begins, or how do you go about that?
No, first drafts seem to take about a year and a half, and that's oddly, whether I'm working now that I can write full time, they still take about a year and a half, even when compared to when I had another job and was fitting in writing around that. I don't quite understand how that works. I must fritter my day away now, really. I don't quite get that. But anyway, yeah, it is about a year and a half to write the first draft. And I call it the first draft, but it's had lots of iterations. I edit a bit as I go along, but about 18 months from when I write the first words to when I write the end. And then maybe 6 months of editing. And that is really full on kind of 8-hour days because I enjoy it so much for 6 months. And I find it quite hard to let it go actually and send it off and think, yes,
it's not
good
so
enough.
much, not so much finished as abandoned as
yes,
many
exactly
film
it.
Directors say the same thing. It's film's never finished, it's just abandoned.
Yeah.
Well, it's great. Well, let's just take a little bit of a step back then. So tell us a little bit about how you became a writer in the first place, because I think you came to writing a little bit later in life. Is that right? Is that after a career in marketing?
That's very
was
polite.
it?
It's a very polite way of saying it. Yes, I was older. Career in marketing. I did my first degree when I was 18, 19 in sculpture, and then I worked in marketing for many years. And then I started writing short stories when I was 40. And that really came about almost the same kind of art projects that I mentioned earlier that I was doing with my husband. And this, I was kind of looking for a challenge. So lots of the things we did were kind of public art that would often make us feel quite uncomfortable doing it, but the process of having done it was really a great feeling. So I came across this short story slam in my local library, having written nothing since I'd left school at 18, nothing creatively. And for that, you had to sign up to write a short story that lasted about 5 minutes and then read it to a paying audience. And the audience voted on their winner, and the winner got a share of the draw's takings. And so writing the story was difficult enough, but then standing up and reading it out in front of the audience was absolutely terrifying. I haven't done any public speaking or anything like that in my job. So of course, didn't win at all. It didn't come anywhere at first. But I entered every month. I think it was every month or every 6 weeks, and I entered lots of times. And then finally, I won the short story competition, and I got something like £9.87, which was my share of the door stakes. But it was my first earnings from writing.
You remember it. That's good.
I do.
So there must have been something about the first actual time you sat down and you wrote that very first short story, especially if it was something that forced you on to break your fears as regards standing up and reading out to people as well. So if you can, what was it about that writing that first story that you found so exciting or captivating, or however you want to describe it?
I think it was having written. It wasn't sitting down and doing the writing. It was having something at the end that I've created this. In the same way that I would create sculptures or drawings, although I enjoy the process of creating those, but it was about having made something. And unlike sculpture and similar to drawing, I suppose, it was kind of almost out of thin air, completely out of my head. There wasn't a lump of stone that I could carve or a piece of wood. I had created this whole thing from my imagination, and that it was quite a powerful idea to have done that, and incredibly satisfying, even though the first story wasn't very good and I didn't win. But I did enjoy having made something, I think, and that's still the case. I enjoy it when I finished, really.
Well, I think Stephen King, actually, you say that there's not that many similarities, but I think Stephen King compares it not to sculpture. I think he compares it to excavation, as if there's something there already and you've got to, and obviously sculpture is a little bit like that. Well, not so much sculpture, I suppose, if you're carving something from stone or whatever, the idea that you're chipping away to reveal something. It's kind of a similar idea, I suppose, in some respects.
It does feel like that, and especially since I don't know where a story is going until I actually write it. My sculpture can be like that too. I have the vaguest idea of what might fit in a piece of stone, and so I start work without really knowing where it's going, and letting whatever I do inform the next thing that I do. And that works with sculpting as well as with writing. So it's similar.
So when you say that, is that as so much in so much as you find an idea or themes or a style as regards your writing in particular? What when you say you take it from one, you finish one thing and then you kind of move it on, develop it. How does that kind of look with your writing?
It starts with a character and a location. Location is really important to understand where that character is existing in space, not so much time, but space, what land they're standing on or what house they're sitting in. And then they do something or they think something, and that has a consequence that the next scene develops from. Perhaps someone else comes into the room and they have a conversation, and something that they say then creates the next scene and the next scene. So one just informs the other, and that is really how the books get written.
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say with swimming lessons that the location is very much a character in itself as well, particularly the sea.
Yeah.
The sea is such a big part of it.
Yeah.
Do you feel that when you're writing it, or is that something you develop more through the editing of the novel?
I guess a lot of that is editing. I do tend to write quite short, so they end at, 60 or 70,000 words, and then with the editing they get up to 80 or 90. So I am adding a lot, as well as deleting and changing words and swapping things about. But I do add in lots of levels of detail. And with swimming lessons, lots of stuff about the sea. And once I decide, because I don't decide on themes or issues before I start writing, but perhaps a long way through the novel I can see things repeating and how themes might work. And then when I edit, I'll go back and bring those out more and develop certain things. So with swimming lessons, it felt to me a lot about whether it's better to have truth or imagination. So is it better, for instance, to know that Ingrid's dead, or to live with the hope that she might be alive? This is what some of the characters struggle with. So that whole theme follows through in lots of different ways.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I noticed that, so obviously you started off, you mentioned originally your original career was marketing and you did a different degree and all those kind of things. So eventually you did study, I think you did a master's, is that right, in creative and critical
That's
writing?
Right.
So what made you decide to get the formal qualification in writing? And do you feel it made you a better writer? Would you encourage other people to pursue a qualification?
I don't think it's necessary at all. I think you can be a very, very good writer without that. But it did help me in that I decided to do it because I wanted to go back to learning, just whatever that might have been. I was quite interested in going back to education for some kind of course, and I'd come into a small amount of money, really not very much, but enough to pay for this course. And I could have used it to pay off a bit more of the mortgage or whatever. But I thought, no, I'm going to spend it on this. And so having signed up, I did it part-time over 2 years, and there was 1 or 2 lectures a week for a couple of years. And what I found really helpful was the discipline. So turning up to lectures and critiques and having deadlines and people setting word lengths for me for certain pieces. All that stuff just made me sit down at my computer and do the work. And I think a lot of the things that I learned, you probably could learn from books. If I had gone to the library and got a whole load of creative writing books from it, there are a lot out there. I probably could have learnt everything that I was taught. There is a way to do it, but would I have actually read them? Would I have sat down and made myself write these short stories? I'm not certain that I would. So for me, it was the discipline. But the other great thing that I got out of it is a writing community. And me and one other writer on this course, we formed a critique group. So I finished in something like 2013, and we've been meeting every month since then in a local pub and swapping whatever we're working on with each other. There's 10 of us in the group, and that has just been so brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. Something that comes up regularly on the podcast is critique groups. I'm in a really good critique group myself, and it's made such a big improvement, I think, to my writing. And as you say, the friendship and the community and everything that you get from it. But it has actually really improved my writing, I think, anyway.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just other people looking at my work. It's me looking at theirs.
Oh, completely, yeah.
Oh, they did that really well. Not like I'm going to copy it, but I'm going to learn from that. Or, I'm not sure that worked, so I'm going to avoid that. It's just so helpful.
Definitely. I mean, we say that in our critique group is you learn so much just from hearing other people critique other people's work, even if it's not always yours. A lot of the time somebody will spot something in a piece of writing. It's not necessarily your piece of writing, it's somebody else's, and you think, now they've said that. I hadn't looked at it like from that angle. I hadn't been able to articulate it like that. So definitely agree. I think it's really, really helpful. It's really brings you on. Okay, that's a nice place to take a break and hear this week's Book Bloggers Corner with show regular Victoria Goldman. Victoria is a freelance health journalist and editor, as well as an avid book reviewer. She blogs at Off the Shelf Books, which features reviews and interviews with authors, publishers, editors and agents. And you can also find her on Twitter at Victoria Goldmar2, where she's always sharing quality content, so go and look her up. Today she's talking about a book from recent guest William Shaw.
This is the BBC Book Bloggers Corner.
Today I'm reviewing The Birdwatcher by William Shaw. The paperback was published nearly a year ago in February 2017, and this crime novel is one of my top reads this year. Rather than read the blurb of The Birdwatcher, I'm going to read the brilliant first few lines, which sucked me in straight away. There were two reasons why William South did not want to be on the murder team. The first is that it was October. The migrating birds had begun arriving on the coast. The second was that, though nobody knew, he was a murderer himself. These lines left me wanting more, very intrigued and wondering what secrets Sergeant William South was hiding. I hadn't read any other William Shaw books until I bought this one, so I had no idea what to expect. This was a great introduction to the author's writing and storytelling, and a very enjoyable read. William South is a quiet man, leading a solitary existence, with birdwatching on the isolated marshes as his only passion in life. He is a neighbourhood police officer with no desire for the limelight, and is reluctant to get involved in a murder investigation, even when he discovers that the victim was one of his neighbours, a fellow birder, and possibly his only friend. The book is written in sharp narrative, with natural dialogue and vivid descriptions of the haunting landscape. I could picture the marshes so easily, thanks to the author's evocative prose, and felt like I was on the coastline too, with an eerie sense of bleakness and solitude. The characters are very engaging and relatable. William South has a new boss, Alexandra Cupidi, who has moved to Kent from the London Metropolitan Police, with Zoe, her unruly teenage daughter, in tow. The birdwatching aspect of the novel provided some calm within the darkness of the plot, and also some touching scenes between William South and Zoe, as he introduces her to his hobby and gives her some focus. The Birdwatcher isn't a fast-paced, action-packed read, but instead it is very much centred around character development and a cleverly constructed plot. As the story gradually unfolds, we learn more about South's traumatic childhood in Northern Ireland through a series of flashbacks dotted throughout the book. This links the present-day murder with events nearly 40 years earlier. To summarise, I found The Birdwatcher to be an intelligent and quirky read. It kept me gripped right until the end, with plenty of surprises along the way. It's far more than just another police procedural, thanks to the brilliant characterisation and great depth of the plot. The Birdwatcher is published by Riverrun, which is a Quercus imprint. William Shaw has a new book coming out with Riverrun in May 2018, called Salt Lane. This features Alexandra Cupidi, the DS in The Birdwatcher, so look out for this too.
Book Bloggers Corner.
So thanks again to Victoria Goldman talking about The Birdwatcher by William Shaw. Let's get back to our chat with Claire Fuller now, with me asking Claire about her first book, Our Endless Numbered Days. Well, tell us about your first book, the first book that actually got published. Tell us about the experience of writing that and your kind of journey to publication.
Yeah, so I wrote that in between my first and second year on the MA. Well, that's when I started it. And then finished a first draft before, I think it was just before the MA finished. I can't remember exactly now. And decided that I would send it off to agents. I wanted to see if I could get it traditionally published. And I picked agents. I think I picked about 12 from agenthunter.co.uk. Mm-hmm. And I picked them on the basis of do they take literary fiction? Did they have an open list? Did they look nice? Did they look friendly? Okay. And sent it off to them. The book, the writing actually started, it came out of a module that I did on the MA, which was film writing, screenplay writing.
Yeah.
And so I wrote the middle sections of the book as if it was a screenplay. I think just 2 scenes. And actually I got my lowest mark on the MA for those. So I'm not cut out to be a screenwriter, which is fine. Because what I really love about writing, the other thing I discovered was I like writing description. It's what I like. I like reading that in books too. And obviously there's no description in their screenplays. Very, very little direction and dialogue. So I redeveloped it into prose and rewrote it. So then I ended up with this manuscript that I had finished and I thought was edited. And I sent it off to 12 agents, not knowing any agents, but understanding how the process worked. I sent off the first 3 chapters and synopsis and covering letter and all that stuff. And very quickly I got some requests for full submission, and I think I got a couple of rejections as well. Mm-hmm. And then one agency called Lutchins and Rubinstein in London invited me in to have a meeting with them and asked me to represent them. Asked to represent me, even.
Yeah. You said, no, that's not what I do. I'm not an agent. And in theory, I'd read all the things about what you're meant to do. And you're meant to go back to the other agents and say, look, I've had this offer of representation. Yeah. But I really liked my agent. I thought she was absolutely great. I had such a good gut feeling about her. Yeah, that I said yes there and then. So I had my agent. I worked with her for about 6 or 8 weeks on edits for Our Endless Numbered Days, and then she selected, I think it was, I'm not sure, 14 editors that she knew who she thought would like this kind of novel. Mm-hmm. And she sent it out to them. And this was the most amazing bit to me, that it went to auction. So we had three offers. And that was the most exciting time. And after, I'm not sure, 2 weeks, something like that, a week, 2 weeks, Penguin won. And the book had, in that intervening time, had also sold in lots of other countries, so it was quite amazing. Must have been fantastic. Yeah, I mean, how did it feel to have such a successful debut? Because when the book actually came out, so you got great critical reception, and you also won the Desmond Elliott Prize, was it?
Yes. But all of it was just like a huge roller coaster. I mean, not a roller. No, roller coaster is the wrong word because that suggests there are some downs.
Just kept going up.
It just kept going up. It was very
Balloon ride.
exciting time.
Yeah.
Yeah, balloon ride. That's a better metaphor.
And I read somewhere that you were really keen to finish drafting your second book before Our Endless Numbered Days was released. But why was that? Why were you particularly keen to do that?
Well, partly because I had these 19 months, although I was still working full time and I had children at home and so on. But it was 19 months, and I thought, I just cannot just sit and wait. So the best thing is to get on with writing something else. But also I had no idea what the reception would be like for Our Endless Numbered Days. And it had sold in a few countries, and Penguin had bought it, but that still is no guarantee that it's going to be successful. So I wanted to get the first draft down before I knew what the reception would be, because if it turned out to be really good, then I might think, oh, I'm never going to be able to do that again. Or it was really bad, I'd think, why would I want to do that again? So yeah, I finished it, I think, in the January, something like that, and Our Endless Numbered Days was published in the February. But I still had lots of editing to do.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I spoke to Matt Johnson, really. He's but and he said he really struggled with his book because there was a bit of a weight of expectation, because he had a bit of success with his first book, because he hadn't written his second book. He was paralysed by self-doubt for a little while, and concerned that he wouldn't be, he suddenly became obsessed with trying to make it perfect, and it kind of really, really slowed him down. So it sounds like one of the reasons it worked for you, kind of avoided all that.
Yes, and I think now, even though I'm still in that kind of cycle where I'm finishing first draft before the last book was published, previous book was published, there is no escape from knowing that there are readers out there. I mean, it's great that people are saying, when's your next book coming out? That's lovely. It's a fantastic position to be in. I'm not really complaining, but it does put some pressure on me to think, will they like it? Rather than just writing a book that I like, that I hope they will like, I'm thinking, I'm reading reviews and thinking, oh, I should have done that, I should do this, and trying to cut all that out and not listen to it is quite difficult.
Do you obviously, from the sounds of it, you do read reviews?
I do. I do.
Some authors, or at least some authors that say they don't read them. I'm not completely convinced by that all the time, I have to say, but
no, I do.
Are there ones that you take more notice of than others, or that that you will seek out over others? I'm not asking you to name them, but I'm just.
Well, I guess my publicist sends me the ones, if there's any national papers and magazines. So I get sent those anyway. But I'm also really interested in what bloggers and just general readers think as well, because they're slightly different than people who review all the time for national papers. They have a different kind of agenda, or no agenda, maybe less agenda. So I'm interested in those as well, and so I do read everything. And of course there are some that are not as positive as I would like. But I think I
That's a polite way of putting it.
Yes.
we've all been seen, where everyone has, unfortunately, those 1-star Amazon reviews that pop up from times.
But I don't let them get me down for too long. I might swear at the screen for a minute or two, and then I move on. I'd kind of rather know what people were saying, whether it were good or bad.
That's good.
And not know at all.
Well, did you at any point during? I mean, did you ever consciously think, right, I'm setting out to write literary fiction? Or was that just a case you'd like to read literary fiction and that's what came out? Did you ever consider going down the genre route, or would it be something that you consider in the future?
It is what I tend to read. So, and the first book that I wrote I was really just writing a book that I like to read without hope that it might be published or someone might pick it up, but absolutely no expectation, because I understood the numbers. in terms of how many books get rejected, novels get rejected. So I was just writing a book almost for me, and it's literary fiction that I mostly read. But I also read some ghost stories and horror even in the past. So I wouldn't necessarily discount those genres. But I don't think I would pick a genre that I don't read a huge amount of, because I just don't. There aren't some genres that have the readers of them have some expectations for how that will work. Or even if you want to break from how that genre works, I think you have to understand how it works in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you need to know the tropes.
Yes, yeah. So I don't have that much interest in writing other genres particularly.
Well, so obviously Swimming Lessons is, the second book came out, and that's had a great reception. Everything has been really well. Just mentioned book 3. Is it? I guess it's too early to tell us anything about book 3, is it? Or can you tell us anything about that yet?
I can. It's recently been bought by Penguin and my publishers in Canada and America, so I'm allowed to talk about it now, I suppose. So it's called Bitter Orange, and what I haven't quite got off pat is my
your blurb for it, yeah.
My blurb or my elevator pitch. I can have a go if you want.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, try it.
Okay.
This would be good practice, actually.
Yeah, exactly. You have to kind of say it loads of times to get it right. So it's about a woman called Frances Jellicoe, who is commissioned in 1969 to survey the follies in an English country house, or the garden of an English country house, which is a derelict house. It was requisitioned in the war and hasn't really been worked on since. So she goes to live there for the summer of 1969 in the attic, and she meets Cara and Peter, a kind of bohemian couple who lead her astray in certain ways, or they certainly teach her to drink and to smoke. And she discovers secrets about the house and secrets about them. And she, as I said, lives in the attic, and they live in the rooms below. And in her bathroom floor, she finds a little spy hole so that she can spy on their bathroom below. And this isn't a spoiler because it's on the first page, but on the last time that she looks through the spy hole in her bathroom floor, she sees a dead body in the bath below.
Right.
So
that's good. Well, that was a pretty good.
That right?
That was a pretty good elevator pitch, considering you've not really practiced it. Yeah, that's good. Made me want to read it anyway.
Excellent.
No, it sounds really, really good. So as we kind of move towards kind of wrapping things up, as we mentioned earlier on, you sort of came to writing a little bit later on, and as someone that's the wrong side of 40 and in his debut novel, I can certainly sympathise with that. Would you have any advice for anybody that may be starting writing a little bit later in life, maybe not coming from a writing background, and just kind of embarking on their writing journey? What would be your advice or your tips?
I think,
maybe?
Don't worry about the age thing, because my first book came out when I was 48, and lots of debut novels have come out when the author's been older than that. Try and ignore all that stuff about beautiful young 20-somethings whose debut novel has just been published, because it can happen when you're older. It is hard to ignore that, because it does feel like the whole publishing industry is geared up for spotting kind of younger, more, I don't know, PR friendly faces. Yes, I'm trying to find polite ways of saying it too. And just finish what you're writing, but that kind of applies to anybody, whatever age you are. I think I've always found it to have lots of good ideas, and then they stop at chapter 4, it's short stories for me actually that get halfway and then just fizzle out. But just keep going.
Absolutely.
Perseverance. Yep.
Good tips. And I'm going to touch on the short stories a little bit when we hang around for our little epilogue question. But for now, really appreciate you chatting to us. Just tell us where people can find more about you online, on your website and on Twitter.
Yes, Twitter, I am Claire Fuller 2, which is the number 2. My website is www.clairefuller.co.uk, and I'm on Instagram. Oh, what am I on Instagram? I think I'm Claire Fuller Writer, or I might be Writer Claire Fuller.
They could always if they search for you on Instagram, they will find you. That's why I don't use Instagram, but yeah.
Oh, I love Instagram. That's where I hang out the most. So
Is
I really
it?
ought
Oh,
to
that's
remember what my
interesting.
name is.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I have got an Instagram profile, but to be honest, I haven't used it for several years. I don't. No, but that's great. All right. Well, I'll put all that in the show notes, and I will find the correct Instagram handle, and I'll put it in the show notes, so you don't need to worry. But for now, thanks very much, Claire. It's been really nice talking to you.
Oh, lovely to talk to you too, Wayne. Thank you.
There you go, and thanks again to Claire. And if you do want to check out Claire on Instagram, you can find her at writer Claire Fuller. Next week, we've got a special Boxing Day episode going out where we'll have a bonus question with Claire talking about short stories, how she writes them and why they can be such fun and so useful. Plus a short chat with indie author Steve Turnbull, so it's kind of a double-header epilogue episode to listen to on your post-Christmas walk or wherever else you like to listen. I'd love to hear what you've all got planned or what you're up to over the festive break, so remember to tweet me at JUPodcast or leave a comment at joinedup.writing.co.uk. The best Christmas present you can give me is to share the show with at least one of your friends and to make sure you subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher or wherever else you find podcasts. iTunes in particular, it takes seconds to leave a quick review and it really helps other people find the show. We now also publish to Spotify, so you can find us on there, and YouTube, so there's no escape. You can check us out on Facebook just by going to Joined Up Writing Podcast, and also, as I mentioned, on the web, joinedupwriting.co.uk. You can also find my personal Twitter profile at Mr. Kelly2U. So thanks for listening to the Joined Up Writing Podcast this year, and I hope you all have a fantastic Christmas. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy reading and writing, and I'll see you next time.
Joined up, right?